Captain Aldrich Voss stood motionless on the bridge of the Cerberus, his weathered hands clasped behind his back, as he watched the massive alien fleet materialize from hyperspace. 47 ships, each one dwarfing his modest exploration vessel. The crystalline hulls of the Velthari warships gleamed like frozen starlight against the void, their bioluminescent weapon arrays pulsing with barely contained energy. "Sir," Communications Officer Nia Reeves called out, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "They're broadcasting on all frequencies. Universal Translator is processing. Got it." The bridge speakers crackled to life with an alien voice that sounded like wind through broken glass. "Human vessel, you have violated sacred space. Prepare for judgment." Voss had spent the last 5 years mapping uncharted sectors for the Terran Exploration Corps, always with the same directive: avoid conflict at all costs. Humanity was still young among the stars, still learning which civilizations could be reasoned with and which would reduce entire worlds to ash for sport. The Velthari had been marked as approach with extreme caution in every xenobiology report. He'd read. "Open the channel," Voss ordered, his voice carrying the calm authority that had gotten him through 3 first contact scenarios. Without bloodshed. Behind him, his crew of 18 worked at their stations with practiced efficiency. They were good people, scientists, engineers, explorers who joined him because they believed in humanity's potential. The finest place among the stars through understanding rather than conquest. The main view screen flickered, revealing the angular features of a Velthari commander. 6 eyes arranged in perfect symmetry studied Voss with predatory interest, while bioluminescent patterns across its cotton-like skin pulsed in rapid sequences. "I am Captain Aldrich Voss of the Terran vessel Cerberus," he began, keeping his tone respectful but firm. "We're conducting peaceful scientific surveys. We had no knowledge this system was claimed territory. We're prepared to withdraw immediately and respect your boundaries." The alien's mandibles clicked together in what could have been laughter or contempt. "You speak of peace while your species spreads like a plague across the galaxy. Already your colonies infest 12 worlds that once knew harmony." Voss felt his jaw tighten. Those colonies were established through legitimate territorial agreements, months of careful negotiation with local governments. But he'd learned that perception often mattered more than truth in interstellar diplomacy. "We seek coexistence," he said. "If we've caused offense, we're willing to discuss reparations. Establish PROTOCOLS." Silence. The commander's voice cut through his words like a blade. "The High Conclave has decreed that humanity's expansion must end. You will serve as an example to your kind." The transmission cut out. Voss immediately turned to his tactical officer, Lieutenant Corvick Dane, a former colonial marine who requested transfer to the Exploration Corps after losing too many friends in border skirmishes. "Corvick, what's our situation?" 4 to 7 confirmed hostiles. "Captain, mixed classes look like battle cruisers, destroyers, and at least 6 dreadnoughts. We're outgunned approximately 800 to 1. Dane's scarred face showed no emotion as he delivered the death sentence. "They're moving to surround us." Through the viewports, Voss could see the alien ships spreading out in a perfect sphere formation, their weapons charging with increasing intensity. Each pulse of light represented enough firepower to crack a moon. "Sir," Engineering Chief Petra Nordstrom called from her station, "I'm reading massive energy buildup across their fleet. Whatever they're planning, it's big." Voss closed his eyes. For a moment, feeling the weight of 18 lives pressing down on his shoulders. He promised their families he'd bring them home safely. He promised himself he'd never become the kind of captain who threw away lives for pride or principle. But as he watched the Velthari ships assume attack positions, he realized that sometimes peace required strength, sometimes survival demanded sacrifice, and sometimes the only way to protect what mattered was to show the galaxy exactly what happened when you cornered a human being with nothing left to lose. "All hands," he announced over the ship's intercom, his voice carrying to every corner of the Cerberus. "Battle stations, prepare for combat." The bridge lights dimmed to combat red as his crew moved with grim determination to their positions, each one knowing they were about to face impossible odds for the simple right to exist. The Velthari struck without warning. A beam of coherent plasma, brilliant as a newborn star, lanced across space and struck the Cerberus amidships. The ship bucked like a wounded animal as its shields flared and died. Emergency klaxons shrieking throughout the corridors. "Shields down to 30%, shouted Tactical Officer Maya Okafor from her station, her fingers dancing across holographic displays as she fought to redistribute power. Hull breach on deck for emergency bulkhead sealed. Voss gripped his command chair as another barrage hammered their starboard side, through the smoke filling the bridge. He could see his crew working with desperate efficiency, Reeves coordinating damage control, Nordstrom rerouting power conduits, Dane targeting the enemy's ships with their woefully inadequate weapons. Return fire, Voss ordered. All weapons, continuous barrage. The Cerberus had never been designed for warfare. Her twin plasma cannons and torpedo tubes were meant for clearing asteroid debris, or defending against pirates, not engaging a full battle fleet. But Dane made every shot count, his targeting systems finding weak points in the aliens' crystalline hulls. Their first torpedo struck a Velthari destroyer, punching through its shields and detonating against its reactor core. The enemy ship split apart in a brief, beautiful flower of destruction, its crew of 300 vaporized in an instant. Got one, Dane reported, but his celebration was cut short as return fire from 6 different ships converged on their position. The Cerberus shuddered under the assault, her reinforced hull plates buckling under the strain. Voss could taste blood in his mouth, could smell the acrid stench of burning electronics and something worse, burned flesh from the lower decks. Captain. Dr. Elena Vasquez's voice came through the comm system from sickbay, barely audible over the sound of screaming. I've got 7 wounded down here, to critical. I need time to. Her transmission cut off as another blast tore through the ship's midsection. Voss made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Korvik, ramming speed. Target the lead dreadnought, sir. Dane looked at him with something approaching horror. We can't win this fight conventionally, Voss said, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. But we can make them pay for every life they take. The Cerberus surged forward, her engines pushed beyond their safety limits. Nordstrom had dumped every available erg power into the drive systems, turning their exploration vessel into a guided missile weighing 40,000 tons. The Velthari seemed confused by this suicidal tactic. Their formation wavered as they tried to adjust their firing solutions, several ships moving to intercept while others continued their barrage. But humans, Voss reflected grimly, had always been unpredictable. The ship's superstructure groaned under the acceleration as they closed the distance through the forward viewports. The enemy dreadnought grew larger until it filled their entire field of vision. A crystalline cathedral of destruction, beautiful and terrible. At the last moment, Voss activated the ship's emergency beacon. The message it broadcast was simple: coordinates, tactical data, and 6 words that would echo across human space for generations to come. Remember us. Make them pay, Earth. The Cerberus struck the dreadnought at 17% of light speed. The impact vaporized both ships instantly. Their combined mass converted to pure energy in a blast that lit up the system like a second sun. The shockwave rippled outward, catching 3 nearby Velthari vessels and reducing them to expanding clouds of superheated plasma. But Voss never saw the explosion. He came to consciousness floating in an alien holding cell, his body a map of burns and broken bones. Around him, the surviving members of his crew hung in similar energy cages: Reeves, Nordstrom, Dane, Dr. Vasquez, and 9 others. All that remained of 18 souls who'd set out to map the stars. The Velthari commander, from the view screen, stood before them, its 6 eyes reflecting a cold satisfaction. Your sacrifice was impressive, it said, the universal translator making its words sound almost human, but ultimately meaningless. You destroyed 4 ships, and killed perhaps 2,000 of our warriors. In return, we will use you to send a message to your species. Voss struggled against his restraints, rage building in his chest like a nuclear fire. What message? That defiance has consequences. That humans who resist the conclaves will suffer fates worse than death. The alien moved closer, its mandibles clicking with anticipation. You will be taken to the proving grounds of Kethmarin. There, you will face our greatest warriors in single combat. BROADCAST across the galaxy for all to see. When you fall, and you will fall, your species will understand their place in the cosmic order. Dr. Vasquez spoke up from her cage, her voice hoarse but defiant. You don't know humans very well, do you? The commander's bioluminescent pattern shifted to what Voss had learned indicated amusement. Enlighten me. We have a saying, she continued, meeting the alien's multiple gazes without flinching. You can kill the man, but you can't kill what he stands for. Captain Voss didn't just send coordinates in that beacon. He sent a declaration of war. The Proving grounds of Kethmarin existed in perpetual twilight, 6 blood-red suns casting their light through an atmosphere thick with the smoke of countless funeral pyres. The arena itself was a masterwork of alien architecture, a crystalline amphitheater that could hold 1 million spectators, its walls carved with the death marks of 10,000 species that had dared to defy the Velthari. Conclave. Voss stood in the center of the killing floor, his hands bound with energy shackles, watching as hovering cameras transmitted his image across the galaxy. The arena was packed with representatives from dozens of worlds, some there by choice, others as conquered vassals forced to witness the price of rebellion. High above in the royal viewing box, the Velthari High Arbiter spread its forearms in a gesture of mock benediction. Its voice boomed through translation matrices embedded in the arena walls. "Behold the human who dared to strike at the chosen of the eternal void," it proclaimed. "Watch as he faces Kurthik the Bone Render, champion of 100 worlds, slayer of the Andromedan princes." The gate across from Voss ground opened with the sound of grinding stone. What emerged was a nightmare-given fleshed 12 feet of chitinous armor and razor-sharp claws, its forearms ending in weapons that had been grafted directly into its bones. Kurthik moved with predatory grace, its compound eyes fixed on Voss with hungry anticipation. The human captain looked small and fragile. By comparison, his exploration uniform torn and blood-stained, his body still bearing the injuries from the Cerberus destruction. But in his eyes burned something that made even the alien crowd fall silent and cold. Calculated fury that spoke of depths they couldn't fathom. "Release his bonds," the High Arbiter commanded. "Let him die with honor. If humans understand such concepts, the energy shackles fell away." Voss flexed his fingers, feeling circulation return to his hands as he assessed his opponent. Kurthik was fast, strong, and experienced, but it was also overconfident. In the dozens of execution combats Voss had witnessed over the past week, he'd watched the champion toy with its victims, drawing out their deaths for the entertainment of the crowd. That arrogance would be its downfall. The bell chimed, and Kurthik charged. Voss didn't try to dodge. Instead, he stepped forward into the creature's attack, letting his primary claws rake across his chest while his hands found the nerve clusters he'd memorized from stolen anatomical scans. His fingers dug deep, finding the pressure points that would temporarily paralyze the alien's left arms. Kurthik shrieked in surprise and pain, staggering backward as Voss rolled away from its secondary attack. The human came up bleeding but mobile, while his opponent flexed its suddenly useless appendages in confusion. "Impossible," the High Arbiter hissed from above. "The human cannot know our physiology so precisely," but Voss had spent every moment of his captivity studying his enemies, learning their weaknesses, preparing for this moment. He'd watched Dr. Vasquez die in the arena 3 days ago, torn apart by a pack of hunting beasts while the crowd cheered. He'd seen Engineer Rodriguez broken on the wheel for refusing to reveal Terran defensive codes. Each death had been another lesson, another piece of intelligence filed away for when his moment came now. As Kurthik recovered and came at him again, Voss fought with the desperate cunning of a species that had clawed its way up from caves and forests to challenge the stars themselves. The battle raged for 20 minutes. Voss took grievous wounds, broken ribs, a shattered collarbone, lacerations that painted the arena floor with his blood. But he gave as good as he got, using every dirty trick, every desperate stratagem his species had ever devised. When Kurthik finally fell, its throat crushed by a precisely applied chokehold, the arena fell silent. Voss stood over his fallen opponent, swaying on his feet, but unbowed. Blood ran down his face as he looked up at the High Arbiter, his voice carrying clearly in the sudden quiet. "You wanted to send a message about humanity," he said. "Here's ours. We don't break." The silence stretched for heartbeats before the High Arbiter's rage exploded across the arena. "Kill him. Kill them all. Bring forth the Void Hunters. Let them feast on human flesh." That was when the first explosion shook the arena's foundations. Then the second, and the third. Far above, Voss could see flashes of weapons fired through the crystalline dome. Ship-to-ship combat on a massive scale. The arena's defensive shields were failing under sustained bombardment, their generators overloading with showers of sparks. Emergency. Klaxons began wailing as sections of the dome cracked and fell, crushing spectators who'd come to watch humanity's humiliation. Panic spread through the crowd as they realized they were under attack by forces unknown. The High Arbiter's voice rose above the chaos, translated into a dozen languages. "Impossible. No species would dare attack the proving grounds. This is neutral territory." That was when a new voice cut through the communications array. Human, female, speaking with the crisp authority of command. This is Admiral Samara Okafor of the Terran Defense Force, by order of the human colonial government. This facility is designated a military target. All non-combatants have 30 seconds to evacuate before we commence orbital bombardment. Voss smiled through his pain. Maya's sister had come, just as he'd hoped she would when that beacon reached Terra. The cavalry had arrived, and they were magnificently, terrifyingly angry. Above him, the dome cracked open, like an egg, revealing the black of space filled with the angular hulls of human warships. He counted at least 50 vessels, maybe more. The entire Third Fleet, armed for war and hungry for vengeance. The message had been received. Now came the reply. Admiral Samara Okafor stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Retribution, her dark eyes fixed on the tactical displays showing the Velthari defensive positions around Kethmarin. She was a small woman, barely 5 feet tall, but her presence commanded the attention of every officer on the bridge. Behind her, the battle flags of 30 human colonies hung in silent testament to the fury she carried. "Ma'am," reported her tactical officer, Commander Hayes. Enemy fleet composition confirmed 237 vessels of various classes. They have formed a defensive sphere around the planet, with their heaviest units protecting the Proving Grounds facility. Okafor nodded grimly. She'd studied the intelligence reports during the 6-week journey from Terra, poring over every scrap of data about Velthari military doctrine. They were methodical fighters, preferring overwhelming force and defensive positions. They thought in terms of honor and ceremony, following predetermined battle patterns that had served them well against less adaptable species. They'd never faced humans in a real war. "Signal the fleet," she ordered. "Operation Cerberus is a go. All ships implement Voss Protocol." The Voss Protocol had been developed in the frantic weeks following the Cerberus beacon transmission, named for the captain who'd shown the galaxy that humans would ram dreadnoughts. Rather than surrender, it was a tactical doctrine based on pure, calculated aggression. No quarter asked, none given. Maximum psychological impact through overwhelming violence. The human fleet moved with predatory precision instead of the expected frontal assault. They dispersed into hunting packs, 3 to 5 ships per group, each targeting specific elements of the Velthari formation. The aliens had superior numbers, but the humans had something more valuable. They were absolutely, utterly furious. "First wave, engage," Okafor commanded. The battle began with a coordinated missile barrage that lit up space like a constellation of dying stars. Human torpedoes, each one carrying a fusion warhead capable of cracking asteroids, struck the outer ring of Velthari ships. The aliens' crystalline hulls, beautiful and seemingly impregnable, proved vulnerable to weapons designed with one purpose: killing everything in their path. 7 enemy ships died in the opening salvo, their crews vaporized before they could return fire. But the Velthari were not helpless. Their response came in the form of coherent energy beams that could slice through human shields like paper. The destroyer Vengeance took a direct hit to her reactor core and vanished in a ball of nuclear fire, taking her crew of 300 with her. "Second wave, moving," Okafor ordered, her voice steady despite watching 300 lives end in an instant. "Close to knife fighting range. Don't let them use their superior firepower." The human ship surged forward, closing the distance at suicidal speeds. This was where their smaller size became an advantage. They could maneuver through the Velthari formation like wolves among cattle, their weapons targeting critical systems with surgical precision. Captain Morrison of the heavy cruiser Bloodhound led his squadron directly into the teeth of the enemy formation, his guns blazing as he carved a path through the destroyer screens. "This is for the Cerberus," he broadcast on all frequencies as his ship rammed a Velthari battle cruiser, both vessels disintegrating in a spectacular explosion. The psychological effect was immediate. The aliens had expected a conventional battle, a series of long-range exchanges that would allow their superior numbers to tell. Instead, they found themselves fighting an enemy that seemed to view death as just another weapon. Humans who would sacrifice their ships and crews for even minor tactical advantages. "Ma'am," Hayes called out, his voice tight with excitement. "Breakthrough in Sector 7. The Hellhound and Savage have punched through their inner perimeter." Okafor allowed herself a cold smile. The plan was working. While the majority of her fleet engaged the Velthari Navy, a strike force led by her most experienced captains, was fighting its way toward the planet's surface. Their mission was simple: extract any surviving humans from the proving grounds and send a message that would echo across the galaxy. But the aliens weren't finished. From the heart of their formation, a massive vessel emerged, a fortress ship the size of a small moon, its hull studded with weapon batteries that could reduce planets to slag. The BlackHFY flagship Eternal Judgment had come to end the human rebellion once and for all. All ships, concentrate fire on that fortress, HFY commanded. Everything we've got. The combined firepower of the human fleet focused on the alien flagship, like a solar flare made manifest. Nuclear warheads, particle beams, and kinetic penetrators struck its shields in a continuous barrage that lit up the entire system. But the massive ship shrugged off the assault, its defensive systems powered by the energy output of multiple fusion reactors. It's not working, Hayes reported. Their shields are holding at 70%. At this rate, we'll run out of ammunition. Before we, Mom, interrupted the communications officer. Message from the surface. It's Captain Voss. The main screen flickered, showing the battered interior of the Proving Grounds arena. Voss stood among the wreckage, supporting a wounded crew member, while alien emergency teams fled in panic around them. His face was a mask of blood and determination as he looked directly into the camera. "Admiral," he said, his voice carrying clearly despite the chaos. "I've got 8 survivors down here, but we're not your primary objective. That fortress ship is their command center. Take it down, and their entire fleet will fragment." HFY felt her heart clench at seeing her sister's captain alive, but she forced herself to think tactically. "Understood, Captain. We're working on it." "No," Voss said, and something in his tone made the entire bridge fall silent. "You don't understand. I've been studying their systems for weeks. That ship has a critical vulnerability. If you can get a strike team aboard, there's a way to overload their power core from the inside." The implications hit HFY like a physical blow. A boarding action against a fortress ship was beyond dangerous. It was suicide. Even if they could get troops aboard, the chances of fighting through the alien crew and reaching the reactor core were virtually nil, unless they had someone on the inside, someone who'd been studying the enemy for weeks, someone who was already as good as dead anyway. "Captain," she said quietly, "what are you asking me to do?" Voss's smile was terrible to behold. "I'm asking you to give me a ride home, Admiral, and a chance to finish what we started." Boarding pods launched from the assault carrier Righteous Fury, like bullets fired from God's own gun. They're armored, holes glowing cherry red as they punched through the BlackHFY fortress ship's defensive screens. Inside each pod, 20 human Marines sat in crash harnesses, their faces hidden behind combat visors, their bodies encased in powered armor that turned them into walking weapons. Leading the assault was Colonel Marcus Kane, a veteran of the Proxima Rebellion whose scarred face had become legend among the colonial Marines. He'd volunteered for this mission knowing it was likely suicide, but he'd also known that someone had to pay for what happened to the Cerberus crew. 60 seconds to impact, he shouted over the comm as alien defensive fire erupted around them. 3 pods to his left vanished in balls of plasma, the crews cremated in an instant. The fortress ship's point defenses were cutting them apart, but enough would get through, enough to make the bastards pay. The pod struck the alien hull with bone-jarring force, its fusion cutters immediately beginning to slice through the crystalline armor around him. Kane could hear the distinctive whine of cutting beams as dozens of other pods performed similar operations, carving their way into the belly of the beast. "Breach achieved," his sergeant reported. "Hostile atmosphere detected." Switching to internal air supply, the pod's front section blew outward in a shower of sparks and metal, revealing a corridor that looked like the inside of a living creature. Bioluminescent panels pulsed along organic-looking walls, while the air itself seemed to shimmer with barely visible energy. Kane led his squad into hell. The BlackHFY were waiting for them. The boarding action turned into a 3-dimensional nightmare, as human Marines fought alien warriors through corridors that defied conventional geometry. The fortress ship's interior was a maze of chambers and passages that seemed to shift and change, forcing the humans to fight their way through not just enemy soldiers, but the ship itself. "Contact front," screamed Private Rodriguez as a wave of BlackHFY shock troops poured around a corner, their plasma weapons lighting up the corridor like a deadly aurora. The Marines responded with concentrated fire from their pulse rifles, the hypervelocity rounds designed to punch through even heavily armored targets. The battle was brutal in close quarters, fought room by room and corridor by corridor. Human and alien blood mixed on the deck plates as both sides took horrific casualties. Kane watched good soldiers die burned by plasma fire, torn apart by alien claws, or simply overwhelmed by superior numbers. But they kept advancing, driven by something more powerful than military discipline. They were fighting for Captain Voss and his crew, for Dr. Vasquez, who died defiant in the arena, for every human who ever dared to look at the stars and dream of better things. Sir, Corporal Chen's voice crackled through the calm. I've got visual on the reactor core. The level's down, heavily defended. Estimate at least 200 hostiles between us and the target. Kane checked his tactical display, counting the blinking dots that represented his surviving Marines. Started with 400, down to maybe 70 now, scattered throughout the ship in a dozen different firefights. Not enough to take a heavily defended position through conventional assault. That was when his comm unit chimed with an incoming transmission from the planet's surface. This is Captain Voss. Colonel, what's your status? We're getting chewed up down here, sir, Kane reported honestly. The reactor core is defended heavily. For a frontal assault, we need another option. Understood. I'm uploading schematics, now stolen data from the computer systems. There's a maintenance shaft that runs directly to the core chamber, but it's heavily trapped and monitored. Kane studied the data flooding his tactical display. The shaft was a death trap, laser grids, poison gas, automated defenses that would kill anything trying to crawl through. A suicide run even by Marine standards. Sir, with respect, that's not a viable option for my men. Anyone who goes down that shaft isn't coming back. There was a pause before Voss responded, and when he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of command decision. Colonel, prepare your men for emergency extraction. I'm coming aboard. Sir, that's impossible. The surface-to ship teleporter was destroyed in the opening barrage. Not the teleporter, Voss said grimly. The old-fashioned way. Can you clear me a landing zone on the outer hull? Kane understood immediately. The man was planning to launch himself from the planet's surface, using one of the arena's ceremonial rockets, ancient Velthari technology, designed to carry the bodies of honored dead to the stars. A one-way trip at the best of times, and certainly fatal if the fortress ship's defenses spotted him. Sir, that's beyond insane. Even if you survive the launch, even if you make it past their point defenses, even if you somehow reach the hull alive, that maintenance shaft will kill you in a dozen different ways. Maybe, Voss acknowledged, but it only needs to kill me after I overload their reactor. Colonel, I've been dead since the moment I ordered the ramming attack, at least this way. My death means something. King closed his eyes, feeling the weight of command settle on his shoulders. Around him, his Marines continued their desperate, holding action, trading lives for time, while alien reinforcements poured in from every direction. Understood, sir. We'll clear you a path. The next 20 minutes were the bloodiest of Kane's career. His Marines fought with suicidal bravery, throwing themselves at impossible odds to carve out a small section of hull that could serve as a landing zone. They held that position with their lives, forming a perimeter of human bodies that kept the aliens at bay just long enough. When the ancient rocket struck the fortress ship's hull, its payload bay opened to reveal Captain Aldrich, Voss in a salvaged EVA suit, his face grim with purpose behind his helmet visor. He moved through the human perimeter like a ghost, acknowledging each Marine with a nod before disappearing into the maintenance shaft that would carry him to glory or death, or both. Behind him, Kane's surviving Marines prepared for their final stand, knowing that whether they lived or died now depended on one man's willingness to crawl through hell itself for the chance to save his people. Captain Voss crawled through the maintenance shaft like a man descending into his own grave. The alien conduit was barely wide enough for his shoulders, its walls lined with sensor arrays and defensive systems that could incinerate him at any moment. Behind him, the sounds of battle echoed through the fortress ship's hull. Colonel Kane's Marines holding their desperate perimeter, while the Velthari threw everything they had at the human boarding parties. The first trap nearly killed him. A laser grid activated as he rounded a corner, ruby red beams crisscrossing the passage in a pattern designed to dice any intruder into component atoms. Voss flattened himself against the deck, studying the sequence, counting heartbeats between each pulse. The pattern was complex but predictable, typical Velthari thinking, beautiful and precise, but lacking the chaotic adaptability that defined human engineering. He moved when the grid cycled down, flowing through the gaps like water, his body contorting in ways that would have been impossible for most aliens. Humans were persistence hunters, evolved to endure where others would break. That flexibility was serving him well now. The second trap filled the shaft with neurotoxin gas, a pale green mist that would have paralyzed most nervous systems in seconds. But Voss had prepared for this, flooding his bloodstream with combat stimulants that would keep him conscious long enough to reach the reactor chamber. The drugs burned through his veins like liquid fire, pushing his heart rate to dangerous levels. But they kept him moving when he should have been convulsing on. The deck dot through his suit's external microphones. He could hear Kane's voice over the comm. All units, falling back to secondary positions. We've lost the primary corridor. Repeat, primary corridor is compromised. The Marines were dying. Good soldiers, following orders, bleeding out on alien decking because their captain had asked them to hold a hopeless position. Voss forced himself to move faster, ignoring the way his vision was starting to blur from the stimulants and toxic exposure. The third trap was the worst, a series of blast doors that slammed shut with pneumatic force. Designed to crush intruders between titanium plates, Voss barely squeezed through the first set before it closed, the mechanism catching his left arm and grinding against his suit's armor. He felt bones crack, felt the suit's integrity breach, but he didn't stop, couldn't stop. Too many people were depending on him. The reactor chamber appeared ahead like a cathedral of living light. The Velthari power core was a thing of terrible beauty, a sphere of contained plasma, suspended in gravitational fields, its surface writhing with energies that could power entire worlds. Around it, monitoring stations tracked every fluctuation, every microscopic change in the reaction that kept the fortress ship functional. Voss dragged himself from the maintenance shaft, his broken arm hanging useless at his side, his suit's life support systems failing as toxic atmosphere seeped through multiple breaches. Around the reactor chamber, dozens of Velthari technicians worked at their stations, their compound eyes reflecting the plasma's glow. They saw him immediately. The first alien to move toward an alarm console died with Voss's combat knife buried in its throat. The second managed half a step before a pulse rifle round took its head off. Voss had salvaged the weapon from a dead Marine during the boarding action, and even with one arm, he was still a crack shot. The remaining technicians scattered, their panic filling the chamber with the chittering sound of terrified aliens. But several managed to reach security stations, and within seconds the chamber's defensive systems were coming online. Automated turrets dropped from the ceiling, their targeting systems locking onto the human intruder. Energy beams crisscrossed the space where Voss had been standing, but he was already moving, rolling behind a bank of monitoring equipment as destruction rained down around him. His suit's heads-up display was flashing critical warnings: life support down to 3 minutes. Multiple system failures, radiation exposure climbing toward lethal levels. The reactor's containment field was already affecting his equipment, slowly cooking him from the inside out. He triggered his comm system one last time, broadcasting on all frequencies. "This is Captain Aldrich Voss to all human vessels. I'm in position at the reactor core, beginning overload sequence now. Tell Admiral Okafor. Tell her she flies with honor." The overload procedure was horrifically simple once you understood Velthari engineering principles. Their technology was based on harmony, balance, perfect mathematical relationships between energy and matter. All Voss had to do was introduce a little chaos into the system feedback loops that would cascade through the power grid, turning the fortress ship's own strength against itself. He ripped open his suit's emergency toolkit, pulling out magnetic charges and jury-rig power couplers, working one-handed, bleeding from multiple wounds. He began connecting human technology to alien systems in ways that violated every safety protocol ever written. Behind him, security forces were breaching the chamber's main doors. Velthari elite guards poured in, their energy weapons painting the walls with deadly light. Voss ignored them, focusing on his work even as rounds sparked off the machinery around him. A plasma beam caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending him crashing into a control console. He tasted blood, felt his suit's remaining systems failing, but his hands never stopped moving. Connect this to that. Bypass this safety system. Introduce instability into a network designed for perfect order. Colonel Kane, he gasped into his calm as another energy beam seared past his head. Get your people to the extraction pods. You've got maybe 2 minutes before this whole section goes critical. Kane's voice crackled back through the static. Sir, we're not leaving without. That's an order, Marine, Voss roared. putting every ounce of command authority he possessed into those words. Get them out of here. The last connection clicked into place. Deep within the reactor core, human chaos began to eat away at alien perfection. The plasma sphere's rotation stuttered, its perfect mathematical harmony disrupted by feedback loops that grew stronger with each passing second. Warning klaxons began to wail throughout the fortress ship as the power grid destabilized. Emergency lighting flickered and died as the reactor's output surged beyond all safety parameters. In the distance, Voss could hear the sound of bulkheads rupturing, of systems failing throughout the massive vessel. A Velthari guard rushed him. From behind, its energy blade raised for a killing stroke. Voss spun, caught the alien's wrist, and used its own momentum to drive the weapon into the primary control console. Sparks erupted in a shower of destruction as critical systems overloaded. The reactor core began to pulse with unstable light, its containment field fluctuating wildly. Voss could feel the radiation cooking him through his failed suit, could taste the metallic tang of his own blood as his body began to shut down. But he was smiling now, watching the beautiful chaos he'd unleashed. The Velthari had made one critical error in their understanding of humanity. They thought humans were just another species to be conquered, cataloged, and controlled. They didn't understand that sometimes the most dangerous thing you could do to a human was back them into a corner, with nothing left to lose. As the reactor core reached critical mass and the fortress ship began its death throes, Captain Aldrich, Voss closed his eyes and thought of his crew. They would be remembered. They would be avenged. And the galaxy would learn what happened when you took a human's family away from him. The death of the fortress ship Eternal Judgment was visible from 3-star systems away. Admiral Okafor watched from the bridge of the Retribution as the massive vessel tore itself apart from within, its hull splitting like overripe fruit as catastrophic power surges raced through every system. The explosion, when it came, was magnificent, a ball of nuclear fire that briefly outshone the system's primary star, sending shockwaves rippling through space. That shattered everything within 100 kilometers. Reactor breach confirmed, reported Commander Hayes, his voice subdued with the weight of what they'd witnessed. The fortress ship is gone. All hands lost, including Captain Voss and the Marines who fought their way aboard. Okafor closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the loss like a physical blow. Good people had died today. Heroes had sacrificed themselves so that humanity could stand proud among the stars. But their sacrifice had not been in vain. Across the battlefield, the Velthari fleet was fragmenting exactly as Voss had predicted. With their command ship destroyed and their fleet admiral vaporized, the alien vessels found themselves leaderless, their rigid command structure collapsing into chaos. Some ships tried to retreat, others attempted to maintain formation, but most simply drifted in confusion as their crews struggled to process what had just happened. "Man," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving surrender signals from multiple enemy vessels. They're asking for terms." Okafor stood slowly, her small frame somehow filling the bridge with authority. She'd spent 6 weeks traveling to this system, 6 weeks studying intelligence reports about Velthari culture and military doctrine. She knew exactly what this moment meant, not just for the battle, but for humanity's place in galactic civilization. "Open a channel to all ships, human and alien alike," she ordered. The main screen flickered, showing the Admiral's image being broadcast across the shattered remains of the Velthari fleet. When she spoke, her voice carried the cold authority of someone who'd just proven that humans were not to be trifled with. "I am Admiral Samara Okafor of the Terran Defense Force," she began. "To the Velthari vessels requesting terms of surrender, your request is acknowledged. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. Any ship that attempts to flee will be destroyed without warning." She paused, letting that threat sink in before continuing. "But understand this, you came to our space. You attacked our people. You tortured and murdered human beings for the entertainment of your audiences. There will be consequences for these actions." In the wreckage of the Proving Grounds arena, the surviving members of the Cerberus crew watched the broadcast on salvaged alien equipment. 8 people remained of the original 18, scarred, broken, but alive. They had lived through weeks of captivity and torture, had watched their friends die in gladiatorial combat, but they'd survived to see this moment. Engineering Chief Nordstrom spoke first, her voice hoarse with exhaustion and emotion. "He did it. The crazy bastard actually did it." Communications Officer Reeves nodded, tears streaming down her face as she watched human ships moving to secure surrendering alien Vessels. They came for us, just like he said they would. The implications of humanity's victory at Kethmarin rippled across the galaxy like shock waves from a supernova. Within hours, every major power in the galactic community had received detailed reports of the battle. How a small human exploration vessel had fought against impossible odds. How their sacrifice had triggered a massive retaliatory strike. How human forces had demonstrated tactical brilliance and suicidal courage in equal measure. The Velthari Conclave, for the first time in their 1,000-year history, found themselves forced to negotiate from a position of weakness. Their invincible fleet had been shattered, their most sacred proving ground reduced to rubble, their military doctrine exposed as inadequate against human unpredictability. More importantly, other species were watching. The Andromedan Trade Federation, the Crystal Hegemony, the Void Walkers. Every major power was reassessing their relationships with this young, aggressive species that had just announced its arrival on the galactic stage with overwhelming violence. 3 months later, Captain Aldrich Voss was laid to rest in the Heroes' Cemetery on Terra, his grave marked with a simple headstone that read, "He asked for peace when they took his crew. He taught them war." The funeral was attended by representatives from 47 human colonies, by Admiral Okafor and the surviving members of his crew, by Colonel Kane and the Marines who fought their way through the fortress ship's corridors. The service was simple, dignified, appropriate for a man who never wanted to be a warrior, but had become one when necessity demanded. But the real memorial to Captain Voss wasn't carved in stone. It lived in the Terran Colonial Charter, amended in the weeks following the battle. The new provisions were simple and direct. Any attack on human civilians, any attempt to enslave or torture human beings, any aggression against human colonies would be met with immediate and overwhelming retaliation. The galaxy had learned a hard lesson about humanity. They were a young species, eager for peace and cooperation. They preferred negotiation to warfare, understanding to violence. But when pushed too far, when their families were threatened, when their people were taken and tortured for entertainment, they became something far more dangerous than simple warriors. They became implacable. Admiral Okafor stood in her office, aboard the Retribution, now flagship of the expanded Terran Defense Force, reading reports from across human space. Colony growth was accelerating. Trade agreements were being signed, and for the first time in their short interstellar history, humans were being treated as equals rather than curiosities. On her desk sat a single photograph: Captain Voss and his crew before their final mission, smiling faces filled with hope and wonder at the universe they were about to explore. Good people who'd wanted nothing more than to map the stars and make contact with other civilizations. They'd gotten their wish, in a way. The galaxy now knew exactly who humans were and what they were capable of. The message had been received, understood, and filed away in the cultural memory of 100 species. Humanity could be reasoned with, traded with, even befriended, but they could never again be safely ignored. Outside her viewport, the stars stretched away into infinity, filled with wonders and dangers yet to be discovered. And somewhere among those distant suns, human ships were carrying explorers and scientists and dreamers to new worlds, protected by the knowledge that their sacrifice would never be forgotten. The galaxy was vast and full of mysteries, but it was also full of humans now, and that made all the difference. Captain Aldrich Voss had asked for peace. When they'd taken his crew, he'd given them something far more valuable. He'd given them a future where no human would ever have to die alone and forgotten in an alien arena, where humanity's children could walk among the stars with their heads held high. He'd given them hope, and sometimes that was worth any price.